My face currently feels like I've been run through by Tom Stewart.
Puts it to the top of the square. Oh, beautiful little fist in there by Dale. Crucial centimetre moments.
He definitely has a bit of the Belcho spirit. As I have a bit of the Belcho spirit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Back Pocket Podcast. If there was a 2023 podcast national draft, we promise you we're not tanking, but we are getting Harley Reid. Joining the show next year. My name is Alistair, joined by, as always, by Jack, having a good giggle over there.
Yeah, I don't think we're pushing the top of the ladder by any means.
Our percentage ain't great.
No, we've got some beltings. Coming off a solid week a couple weeks ago. Last week, poor performance. Really didn't bring it in. But, the boys are going to learn from this. It's a young group.
Look, I'm going to back them in.
They
have my full support.
There's no point panicking this early in the season. You just have to regroup and trust your game plan and hope that it'll come right when you get it working.
10 days later. Jack Turner has been sacked as CEO of the Back Pocket Podcast.
All right. Votes. My one vote was to Brodie Smith, who I think is a first-time vote getter.
I think he is.
On the podcast. I thought his game was really good. He got 8 coaches' votes. He had 8 rebound 50s and 8 intercepts. 32 touches at 87.5. I think kicking was pretty similar to 90% as well. I had 5 score involvements, a score launch, 3 spoils, and 9 defensive half pressure acts, which I thought was a pretty
good stat line.
Pretty round performance. Brodie Smith's had a few good weeks in a row now.
He's always been good. He's been, when Adelaide were at their lowest, he was always one
I remember
of their
you getting
best.
very excited a couple of weeks ago watching him play a good game.
No, because they were playing Carlton.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, of course he pulls it back out now.
That's right. Other way around.
But no, Brodie Smith is good, and he, as I just said, he carves up my team up all the time. But his kicking is a real weapon.
Yes.
I would probably have him in the top percentage of kicks in the league.
Yeah, and look, confusing that he plays on the back flank because, as we heard earlier this week from Robert Walls, it's surprising you put your best kick on the back flank.
Yeah, no, definitely don't want any good kicks out of D50.
Not something teams do very often at all. Who was your one for the week?
My one, and this might seem low, is Mason Redman.
Didn't get one from me, so
we
I understand.
We all love Mason Redman. I don't love the bullhorns. We can put those
It's
away.
very tacky. I feel like we're past it now.
30 disposals, 97% disposal efficiency, 10 intercepts, 7 marks, 568 metres gained, and 6 rebound 50s in a pretty bad loss.
Yep.
He was their shining light.
I'll cross him out of my special mentions because he was in there. Yeah, in a game where they just disappeared in the second half. Really impressed with their first half. And then they just kind of whimpered away. It looked like both games were going to do the same thing. Look at three-quarter time, you saw both Brisbane and Carlton just storm back into those games, whereas the last quarter of the Carlton Bulldogs game was a really good quarter of footy, and Brisbane Essendon just kind of continued with more of the same over the third quarter. So
I think the other caveat to that is Brisbane are actually looking pretty good.
Yeah, they are. And look, at home they are
give
always...
Give them props for getting Joe Danaher to kick 6 against Essendon.
And kicking straight, incredible. But yeah, they're always strong at home. We know that, especially home and away. I think they've only lost like 3 at the Gabba outside of finals for the last 6 years or something. It's pretty... So, 6.
They beat Collinwood this year,
yeah?
Yeah. So that really tells a
story.
Yeah,
so... And even last year they've started winning finals there. So they're really stepping up in that regard. I think that's fair for Redmond to get a vote in a game against a really good team away.
Can't give him more than one.
My 2 was to Daniel Rioli. His first half was insane. He went off with a niggle of sorts and then came back on. I think he wasn't as impactful after he came back on, but the damage had been done. It was intercepts just past the halfway mark. He was really around the middle of the ground, where Geelong just couldn't get it through that point into the forward half of the ground. He was just really, really dominant and helped their ball use going forward, because outside of their frantic Hackett forward pressure game, having a kick like his moving into the front half of the ground is huge. So he had... I think he got 5 coaches' votes in the end. He was 23 disposals, 4 rebounds, 4 intercepts, and 8 defensive half pressure acts. But I think it was just the impact of those disposals and when he got them, which is, I guess, how he plays a lot of the time. That
kicked a goal too.
Locked it in for him. He did kick a goal, yes.
So your favourite when a defender gets up forward?
Yeah, well, he kind of went up forward, I think, in the last quarter when he was, hobbled a little bit. So
that takes me to my 2. which is another show favourite, Ed Richards.
Yep. Also, my special mentions didn't get in, but he was...
Dominant is the word I would use.
Yep.
25 disposals, 92% efficiency, 10 intercepts, 10 marks, 483 metres gained, 4 rebound 50s, 6 1%ers. The first quarter, when Western Bulldogs were probably dominant, he was sweeping the back half like no other. I was sitting there.
Was a big reason for why the inside 50s were just going nowhere.
Yep. I was sitting there and my sister said, "Is that Ed Richards really good?" I'm like, he is, but he's not this good.
Yeah, he's normally good-ish.
Yeah.
My quote for the night was our, fellow ranger to Ed Richards. AJ looked up at one point and just went, "Jesus Christ, Ed Richards," and that was pretty much summed up how his first half went.
Yeah.
So I get him being in there. So
I'll throw my special mention out now. You don't have to tell me if they're in there later, but Liam Jones also from that game.
Yeah,
was
special
really,
mention for
really
me
good.
as well. He's putting together a really good season.
Yeah, solid.
As we kind of knew he would. He's just always been that good. And that time out of the game doesn't seem to have bothered him too much. He was slow to get going, as someone should be when they miss 2 years of footy, but he's really found his own again.
1 year.
1 year? I thought it was
1
2
year
years.
of footy.
Oh, okay. My 3 votes was to someone who impressed me the most since they've been put down back was Andrew McGrath. He kept Cameron goalless in a Brisbane win at the Gabba. Had 7 defensive half pressure acts, won 3 out of 3 contested defensive one-on-ones, 7 intercepts from 18 disposals, 7 rebounds and 4 score launches. Is an insane game of football from someone who was meant to be an inside mid when they started playing. It's the best I've seen someone hold Cameron at the Gabba probably ever, outside of maybe Brisbane and Geelong doing it in finals to them. And yeah, in a game where they lost by, 5 goals in the end, kept him to 1 point. So, plaudits Andrew McGrath.
Yeah, damn good.
Someone I never thought would be in the votes.
Yeah, well, I was watching him pretty closely, and he didn't look... he gets a lot of flack, is probably the right word. I thought he looked quite good.
He did, and his foot skills have always been something Essendon wanted in the midfield because they struggle for that, and it really helped coming out of the back line. It's better than...
I think Merritt's always been a good kick inside the middle, but they haven't had much support, especially since bringing in Dylan Shield.
Yes, and Shield is in a lot better form this year.
Yep, I totally agree with that.
You brought it up the other day when we were talking to some mates of ours that were flacking him, but... Flacking him? Anyway.
Yeah, we'll go flacking him.
And yeah, I agree with you. He's having a really good season. And it looks more like the football they brought into the club.
Yep.
We're talking about Taranto being one that you didn't notice that shanked it a lot before he came into Richmond. I think Shield was the same for me. I didn't think he was that poor of a disposal.
How are GWS hiding it?
Is it because they've got Cogs and Kelly to get the disposal that is the good one off of Taranto and Shield? Who knows? But anyway, your 3.
The good old Charlie Ballard.
Is my 4.
Is your 4, okay.
Easy enough. Yep.
Yeah, I'll let you run through the stats because you take down more notes than me.
I did write down a few. It's hard to not give votes in a record-equaling game, despite the opposition. He had 10 intercept marks and 8 of those were contested, which is the most insane part of that. It wasn't like they were picking him out like a lot of those games are. He was just taking them, trusting himself. Had 9 spoils on top of that, which means that 19 times they went inside 50, and he stops them from having any opportunity.
And it wasn't a typical feast on a bad opposition game where you get like 15... How many marks did he have? He had 11 marks. I was going to say 15 marks and you get like 28 disposals.
Yeah, no, he genuinely was just a dominant force. And he had 3 score launches as well, which is, considering he barely left the back line, he's just really good. He is really finally becoming the footballer.
He's 23. He's 23.
Yeah, and that's the thing again. Key defenders, people expect to come on as fast as midfielders, and they don't. And we're seeing, I think, the rise of Charlie Ballard, which is really good. So,
sound like a movie. The rise of Charlie Ballard.
The second movie is The Becoming of Stuart Dew. War for the rugby state.
Who's next? Your 3.
Your 4's next.
Oh, you did your 3? Oh,
yeah, my 4 was Ballard. Yeah.
I'm giving my 4 to Harris Andrews.
Yep. He, weirdly for me, was in my special mentions, but put into a hell of a season.
Yeah.
I had him written down. I wanted to bring up that, like, it's almost to the level where he, like, almost gets votes every week, the way he's playing. But yeah, he was my special mention. So, yep, Harris Andrews is fair.
Yeah, 19 disposals, 90% disposal efficiency, 4 intercepts, 12 marks, 10 1%ers, with a bunch of those being spoils.
He's picked up the kicking, which was the thing that was his biggest flaw, I think, in past seasons, even when he made All-Australian. He's hitting targets coming out of the back line consistently, and it's really making their offence look scary.
It's really improved Brisbane.
They're cutting teams apart.
they had that little patch where everyone was like, "Oh, I'm not sure about Brisbane." Even I said that on the show.
Yep. Their first 3 weeks they looked really shaky.
He's pulled it together for them.
But I'd say they're almost the form team of the comp now. Obviously, Collingwood is the team, but
Yeah, there's no denying that.
Brisbane are looking really, really good. So my 5 was drumroll, please. Long-time friend of the show, Nathan Broad.
Same.
What a game! Like, I only got 8 coaches' votes as most on the ground. He really owed Richmond after missing the first part of the season.
Just give a big 10 to Nathan Broad.
It's incredible. Amazing.
My reason, because I had both of these written down as 4/5, and I made my decision at the last minute there. I think it's purely because of the opposition he played on.
Yeah, it was the fact that, so, like I said, he owed Richmond. He missed their hardest patch of games through suspension. They haven't won without him this year. So we mentioned that about Colo a few weeks ago for Geelong. Richmond have lost one game with Broad on the side. They've drawn or won every other game. He not only kept Cameron to 1 goal, but once Bolter started getting beaten by Hawkins, he let Cameron go outside 50, and he just dropped back and filled in that hole, and
Hawkins' influence completely
disappeared from the game. He had 9 spoils, 10 pressure
He
acts
had
in
one
defensive
more
half,
goal after that started happening.
11 intercept possessions, 5 of those were marks, 3 tackles. He plays so well against Geelong, which I feel like is despite me. It's incredible how well he plays against Geelong consistently, and it pisses me off. And it might be because Geelong have the tall forward structure to match his game. Like, he can run and, defend. So, yeah, great game, Nathan Broad. I do think it's insane, though, that it's worthy of a 5-vote game, even though, like, Jeremy Cameron had a bad game, which was 21 touches and 8 inside 50s. Because Cameron's just freakish. You keep him to 1 goal and low score involvements, and that's good. That's all you need. But he still had a game which was most people's best game.
I think taking the 2, Geelong are more likely to win a freakish game if he kicks 6 goals as opposed to him kicking
the ball
15
inside
times
50.
inside
well,
50.
And I said to you earlier today about Graham Myers, kicked to 5 marks on the lead inside 50, and none of them were goals. So, if you can take that influence out of the game from Cameron actually kicking goals, then you've gone a long way to limiting Geelong's influence against you.
Definitely.
My special mentions, outside of the ones that you've mentioned, I only had 3 left. The first one was Noah Bolter, who I thought, despite obviously needed Broad's help, really pulled it together in the second half. I think ended up with 12 intercepts for that game.
I also had Bolter written down.
Salvaredda did a really good job. Rewalt was forced to change the way he was playing to combat Radaglia, which is huge credit to him. And Tom Barras had 19 spoils.
That's pretty good.
And I wanted to give a special mention just for that. Like, I know Gold Coast was scoring like it was, a party, but 19 spoils is a pretty massive number. So that was my last one. Do you have any footy stuff you want to touch on? Because I've got a couple of topics.
As you know, every single week I come to you with one promise.
Yeah.
It's that I've written no notes.
I love that. My first one is the grand final time slot. I feel like every year the AFL comes out and does a survey, and the fans say keep it at 2:30, and then the AFL says we really like the idea of a twilight or a night slot, and the fans say we really don't like that, please don't do that. And then midway through the year, the AFL goes, there's an announcement. It's at 2:30. Just leave it. Just lock it in for 5 or 6 years. I feel like it's just a deliberate media cycle.
Only reason they don't is because they're hoping one year they get just enough to justify swapping it.
40% will be close enough for them.
It's an advertising and
gambling
thing,
it doesn't
right?
matter with the advertising and gambling anymore because they've locked in the media rights deal for 10 years.
Yeah.
So just lock in the grand final time slot. You've paid the money. Or they've paid the money.
I feel like all Channel 7 or Fox have to do is be like, we'll give you an extra milli.
Yeah.
On this, or however much milli's not much for the AFL, but you know what I mean. Milli's a lot for me.
Yeah,
if anyone wants to
a cool mill.
donate a cool mill to the Ko-Fi account,
even
that's
$1
money
million
laundering.
cents would be fine. Obviously, we kind of mentioned on the side and passed over it. Pendlebury mentioned during the week that compared to a lot of other sports, in terms of revenue, AFL players aren't paid enough. And I do tend to agree. If you want to safeguard AFL from other sports stealing players, especially now that basketball's getting a huge pull on Australian players. Obviously, rugby's always there as a threat, and cricket obviously now is paying a lot more than it was before. You're going to have to increase the wages of AFL players to match the world circuit because they are elite athletes.
I do agree in one sense, but I can see why it hasn't happened in the fact that in Australia it feels like there's a reverence towards AFL footballers that isn't as seen, at least from my eyes, to at least rugby players. I think
Rugby,
there's definitely
cricket for sure, and
basketball
basketball.
and cricket have, or cricket especially. But
Even your Formula One and stuff, I think our
Yeah.
elite in that I don't recognise. And that's the thing I was going to say, players like Martin and Danger and Buddy would not be able to walk down the street without
Nope.
being recognised, and I don't think they're paid that kind of a salary in football. I did think that it was really funny that Pendlebury used the NBA example, which does make sense because he does have a basketball background. To bring up was like the comparison. They're like, they get more than 50 for the players, and the AFL gets 25%. I love that he went straight for basketball. He was like, straight away, he's like, basketball. Which is what he chose not to do, to have one of the most successful AFL
I think
careers of all
it's
time.
the easiest way to
Rationalise it, I think. to people.
infer that a pay rise needs to happen.
Yeah.
I disagree slightly with what you said before, though, about Danger, Buddy, and Martin not being paid enough to be recognised. I would happily take $1 million a year.
No, but
to not be able to
I
go
don't
to
mean that they're
Bunnings
not
without
paid
being
enough.
stopped by
I
a
more just
flog.
mean like if you compare it to any job in the world where you are in that kind of role, those people are paid more than AFL
Sure,
footballers.
but there's also media deals, right?
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
to use it again, don't get mad at me again. Danger's not doing cotton on ads for free.
No.
He's not going to cash converters
Amy
or
ads.
Amy ads. That's putting more money in his pocket.
Yeah, for sure.
Those ads won't stop
Yeah.
if they get more money. It will just keep going and going. Not that I'm advocating that they shouldn't get more money,
Yeah,
because I
of
believe
course.
they should.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
But there is a lot of money that comes from
there-
those spots.
It's just, I look at my wage and your wage and I just go,
Oh yeah, look,
What the fuck?
I'd kill for that kind of money. Don't get me wrong. I just think the main perspective is the one that Pendlebury used, which is if the AFL players are the people who make the sport, they should be getting the major share of the money in the sport because it's nothing without them. All the CEOs do is make the game worse year after year. Like
I wonder how many media personalities on Fox and Seven get paid more than
players.
top line
Gerard
players.
Whateley absolutely would get paid
Yeah,
more
do
than
you
any
reckon
player in the
BT
AFL.
gets paid more than someone like
God, I hope not.
Jeremy Cameron?
Kane Corns probably does. He works like five.
He
different...
works for 5 places though.
Yeah.
Which one do you reckon he takes the tax threshold on?
SEN, surely.
I reckon they pay the most.
They'd
for
pay
it.
the most.
Yeah.
They're the ones that pulled Whateley away from
ABC.
ABC for squillions of dollars. So I absolutely be claiming the threshold at SEN. Not that it would matter when you're earning that much money. Like, oh cool, I get the tax threshold for like 2 weeks of the year.
It's important to me.
I was obviously made to eat crow pretty fast on my comments about Richmond.
It's
just
unfortunate,
immediately
isn't it?
beating Geelong, but I
Did
still
I mention that last week when you were
No,
saying
you
that?
didn't.
Oh, shit.
But I still kind of stand by my thought they won't play finals. I still think that,
I agree.
Even if they beat Essendon this week, which I think is a line ball game, Dreamtime's always interesting.
I think they will. I think they'll have some confidence even against.
I still thought Geelong would win, but like it was never going to be a shock that they didn't, with injuries and the fact that Richmond are always going to get up against Geelong. We saw it even last year, where the two teams where they finished were leagues apart. Richmond had that game until seconds to go. And that was a full strength Geelong when they played them last year too.
I think the best way to tell if Richmond are going to sort of hit that 10-11 win marks and just miss out is whether or not Dusty kicks another bag.
Yes,
this week.
for sure.
If he kicks 3 or 4,
Then
that's
danger.
they're on. If he doesn't, then I don't have faith in them.
And I think the thing for me is that they've got Port twice, St Kilda twice, Brisbane in Brisbane, Melbourne and the Doggies to come. And all of those are really tough games.
They also have all 4 easy beats.
They do, yeah, but obviously that's not going to get them totally across the line. So
it takes them to 7 if they beat all of those. They still won't make finals.
Yeah.
I totally agree there, but I think they could hit as high as 10th.
yeah, and they could end up just percentage out. I think the year is going to be very close, especially coming for that 8 to 12 bracket like it was last year.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to be in that mix. I just think that they've done their percentage. Won't be percentage out. They're a draw, but that draw is the same thing. I think they've done enough damage early with losses to the Gold Coast and that kind of thing, which obviously Geelong did as well. But
Gold Coast, I'm still not sure where they'll end up.
Yeah, who knows?
They
Like,
could be in the air. They could be 14th, 15th.
beat Geelong, beat Richmond, almost beat Melbourne, but then got trounced by St Kilda. So yeah, really, who knows? So
Who then just got their complete asses handed to them.
yeah, by 2 good teams in a row played St Kilda and just went, well, we'll just go past them, I guess.
Which is awkward because they're supposed to be
The
built
best
on run.
Yeah. So, it was interesting. Like, I think Adelaide and Port did it different ways. Like, Port really just kind of went over the top. Port just went, you're going to build a wall, we'll just go over it. We've got height down there, we'll figure it out. Whereas Adelaide just picked their way through with absolute precision. It was a delight to watch.
It's insane how Adelaide have the speed and the kicking efficiency.
Yeah.
They're going to be dangerous in years to come.
I thought what was really interesting was that
But That was also them when they were in their flag running.
It was
contention.
yeah.
They had the
Multiple
big
times,
keys.
yeah.
They had the speed. Interesting.
I thought what was really interesting was that once Adelaide were up that first quarter, which they just tore them apart, because they were up, 5-1 at quarter time, it forced St Kilda to play Adelaide's way because they couldn't play a slow defensive game when they were already 4 goals down. And it just meant the game was over for there because St Kilda's not built to play a really high-octane scoring type of football. So, credit to Adelaide for maybe even building a system for how to beat St Kilda for other sides because there was a...
It's really interesting because 2 weeks ago I would have been very bullish on St Kilda being potentially top 4, and now I feel
it's like, do they make the 8?
Do they make the 8? I think they do.
They've got a lot of hard fixtures to come.
I think they just... I think they're 7th or 8th.
We saw how they played against Collingwood, who are obviously a really good team. They still went really close against Port. So they're still really getting there, but it is a bit of a worry. We talked about this earlier.
Did we?
I just want to side by Ollie Henry for a bit.
Oh.
I know he's only going to be 2 weeks out, and I think the longest anyone's lost to a ruptured testicle was 6. But I genuinely think I'd rather do an ACL. I think I'd rather just have my season over with a bung knee than have a ruptured testicle.
Agree.
That's one of the most horrific... Steel Sidebottom a few years ago said it was like the feeling of being kicked in the nuts, but it doesn't stop.
It's like, there's not many other parts of my body so I've taken injury to. Obviously, internal organs I probably don't want.
You don't want like a Tom Milligan ruptured kidney or eyeball's bad. Yeah.
But testicles up the top.
Yeah, it's right up there.
It's really up there.
I think, eyeball's worse. I felt nut pain. I felt eye pain. You've experienced me feeling eye pain. I don't deal good with eye pain.
It's amazing you didn't get any kind of nickname out of that.
Thankfully. I looked it up today because the most famous one I remember for the testicle was James Kelly because obviously there was footage of it. We saw it happen in a game. Sidebottom was at training or whatever. And it was the fact that he came down like a belly flop on the floor. You know, he lost a third. Like, they had to cut off a third of his nut.
I thought you said he had a third nut and he lost it.
No.
I was like, what are you talking about? He lost a third. He lost a third of his nut. Okay.
Because I heard them asking about it. He did a bit on the front bar, and he was just like, "Yeah, ask whatever you want." Like, I don't know what you're going to get out of it, but like, he lost a third of his nut, and he said that it wasn't until he could run without feeling like he'd been kicked in the nuts that he could play again.
I feel ill. Just hearing about this.
Horrible time. On to bad teams.
Who are we talking about?
Harley Reid Cup potentially this weekend. Hawks and West Coast in Tassie. I think the Hawks get it done in Tassie.
I don't think West Coast will take Harley Reid.
You know, reckon?
I reckon they'll trade that pick and pick up multiple WA players.
I think that's the smarter move, especially
that's way smarter.
Especially if they can get rid of a few of the older players and bring in high-end picks to replace it. If they get pick 1 and 19 and trade them both on for like a range in the top 20, other picks in the top 20, that's a much better move.
Pick 1 has so much power.
It does.
You could get 3 picks for it.
We talked about it recently that Adelaide got Adelaide got Dawson, Rochelle, and Rankin
with
what they offered for Horn Francis.
Yeah.
Which is, Horn Francis has looked really good this year, credit to him. You're taking those 3 any day.
It's a win just on
Dawson alone.
alone.
And then Rankin and Rochelle has been their power. That's their force at the moment. So, incredible. And, we said this earlier. We kind of did a little chat about it yesterday, and I didn't mean to run you through it because I was going to bring it up today. But, the top pick is sometimes a bit of a curse. I think most years,
go through that. All right,
pick 2 and sometimes pick 2 and 3 genuinely is a better pick.
It's hard because you're not always going to get the best player. The best player isn't always going to go number 1.
Absolutely.
It's based on their talent that you see as a
and
junior.
And your need is an impact on it as well.
And also how they're developed.
Yes.
Depending on the club, like if you sent Jason Horne-Francis, you sent the number 1 pick to North, absolute shambles. He ends up at Port. And look what's happening.
But it's interesting. The Harley Reid cut reminds me, the last time I remember it happening, which is obviously way later in the year, was when Hawks and Tigers played the Brett Delidio Cup, which was obviously widely advertised because it was genuinely whoever wins that game gets off the bottom of the ladder. And no offence to Delidio, who was a very good footballer, they both got priority picks that year because the AFL was just handing him out willy-nilly back then. Hawks got Roughhead pick 2, Franklin pick 5, and Lewis pick 7. While Richmond picked up Delidio with pick 1 and Tambling with pick 4. That is a nuts difference
Look, it's really
between
unfair
because if they just took
to Deledio.
it is because he was a very good footballer. But like if you're taking just Franklin and Lewis instead of Deledio and Tambling, that Richmond team gets better a lot faster than it does. Wild that's what they ended up with out of that. And Deledio wasn't even there by the time they won that first flag. They beat him in a prelim because he was at another club. That first pick is...
I felt really bad for him that day.
I remember that year it was the two prelims were Dangerfield playing Adelaide and Deledio playing Richmond in their first year at the other clubs and getting beaten as those teams went through to a grand final, which is crazy. Like it's because they were probably the two biggest movers in that off season. And yeah, I do wonder if pick one's a bit cursed. There's not been many good ones. Like even Wiedering's obviously the one.
I think Wiedering's good.
The comfortable winner. Walsh obviously was a good one.
A bit young,
but like even Walsh's year, picks 2 through 5 are also very good footballers.
I think that draft looks really
incredible.
solid.
But there's a lot of years where you look at like other picks in the top 5, like multiple of them are all better than the pick one. So I feel like the power given to pick one is weird, and it's why I don't hate that draft lottery idea so much. Because if you're not incentivizing teams to get pick one by losing on purpose, so if you just finish in the bottom 4, you've got a chance of getting pick one. I feel like it makes them play with a bit more competitiveness at the end of the year. And also, it means that maybe the teams who finish bottom aren't just going to pick one and it falls flat on its face more times than not.
I get where you're coming from. However, I also feel like it still encourages the same thing. If you're 16th or 15th and you have the chance to move out of that bracket and potentially go from getting pick 1 to pick 8.
But I feel like but I also feel like the problem, the other problem with the draft lottery is if you bring it in for the whole outside of finals, that's really dumb. Because you look at how close 9th, 10th and 11th last year were to being in the top 8. You can't bring it in like that. So I think that's why it's so unsustainable for AFL. And I also think a big part of the problem is...
But even if you bring it in now and the bottom 4 teams are raffling for it,
and then suddenly
you've got 3
Tasmania
basket cases and then maybe GWS, let's say, who are clearly better than those other 3.
And that would have been the problem
if
last
they get
year.
Pick 1 and the teams that are struggling don't.
That would have been the problem last year if Essendon got pick 1.
Yeah.
Ahead of the Hawthorn North and West Coast, who are still really struggling, and Essendon have been decent again this year and were decent the year before it.
Yeah, and like Port Adelaide finishing lower last year.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think a lottery is sustainable because of that.
And another thing is, I think that like it's obviously most famously used in the NBA, but in a game where there's 5 people on the ground at one time, the best player can change the team on its own. Whereas in the AFL, one absolute superstar isn't going to...
It does happen more often than you think, though.
Well, yeah, but not in like... It does take a core of players.
Oh, I agree.
Like you bring in the best player in the comp to the worst team, and they're not going to miraculously win 5 more games, even let alone 10.
Oh, I'm pretty sure if you put Jeremy Cameron at North, they would win a few more games.
You're probably right, actually. Yeah,
because he would be playing middle and forward.
God, that'd be actually kind of terrifying. But like when Gold Coast had Ablett, I think is the best example. They definitely won more games because he was there.
Of him, yeah.
But it didn't make them suddenly a contender.
No, it didn't. I mean, they're still yet to make finals. So.
Yeah, well, it's frustrating, isn't it? Last year was their best shot.
Yeah.
They're in a bit of a mid-level this year, but like last year they really were on track and they had the run home to do it, and they really squandered some games they absolutely should have won to miss out on finals when they definitely shouldn't have. Which is the Gold Coast way, really.
Yeah, they usually start off really hot.
They do, and this year they've kind of not. Which maybe that's a good sign. Maybe they're going to finish hot. I don't know if you saw, so it was obviously Mother's Day footy on the weekend. Did you see the Collingwood pre-game bit?
No.
So instead of Fly giving the pre-game rev up,
Bo
McCreary's mum gave the pre-game rev up.
I did hear about it. I didn't watch it.
It was very wholesome. And like I think that's a big part of what they've done a good job of at Collingwood is making those players love playing there. Like they're just having a really good time, and you can see that when they play. But I think a main part of it is that like the pressure to not lose isn't there like the way it is at some other clubs. Like I feel like they don't have that overbearing weight on them every time they go out.
But does that come because they've been winning, or does it come because of...
Well, it is hard to say, because like this year obviously they have been winning, but last year they weren't, and they were playing that same style of football. Like they were 11th 6 rounds in and 9th at the bye, and they played that style of football all throughout the year, and that's what got them home. So it is hard to say.
But does that culture then build from there with each of those
wins?
I
think so.
And now it's solidified, and, now it's really you can't break it apart. Whereas you use counterpart Carlton, for example, who have been losing, and there's a lot of pressure piling up in a coach's second year at the club. I just want to point out, and
I think he was his own worst enemy with the strong start last year.
Yes.
I think that the expectations were built around his coaching future based on the first 10 weeks of last season. And from then, it's been pretty par for the course, ups and downs, ebbs and flows, as a new coach would expect. He needs a few more gears, I think.
But if, let's say, Carlton win their next 6 games in a row, which is not happening,
Yeah.
and those players are playing with flair, and they seem happy, and they're high-fiving on the boundary line,
Is it suddenly
is that
culture?
energy from culture, or is that just because they're winning?
Yeah, it's true.
If Craig McRae's Collinwood
that's a
lose the
part
next
of-
10 games, does the pressure not get turned up to 11 on them?
And that's a big part of the question, isn't it? Like, obviously, West Coast back in the day when they were able to pull anyone back to WA they wanted, and how Geelong does now, like, is that because they have a good club culture?
Or even back in the day, West Coast can still do that.
Well, yeah, but you're right. But, like, they had a much stronger pull before.
I think they've lost one ever, and it was Luke Jackson.
But I more just mean, like, that's a great point of that. Like, those clubs are often praised for their culture, and it's why players want to go there. But, like, players want to go there because they're winning.
Yep.
AFL players who don't care about the money as much, like, they'll get a lot of money regardless wherever they are if they're that kind of footballer. If you don't care about the difference $100,000 a year is going to make you as a footballer, and you just want to win games, you're going to go to clubs like West Coast or Geelong if you want to go home, because that's where you're going to win games. It's just sensible, isn't it? Sydney, yeah, great example. Like, why do you think Buddy went to Sydney instead of GWS? Like, because they win. Pretty simple.
It was very obvious.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's a big part of the culture discussion.
It's winning.
Yeah.
I think you
winning
having
culture,
a good
is culture.
important.
Yes.
Would North Melbourne have done better with players like Thomas or Jason Horne-Francis if they won 8 more games that year?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I think a really good example is Dew is by all means, there is a good culture at Gold Coast, but it's not talked about because they're not winning games. They've signed on...
Dew and those players are very
They've
very
signed on
tight.
young players for the first time in the club's history for, like, long-term deals. The players love Dew, they love the way the club's being run, but it's not discussed in the way it is for other clubs.
Because they're not winning.
Yeah, because they're not winning. I wish they were.
I feel like it's very simple. Like, remember the start of the year, the Bulldogs and Bevo was being lambasted.
I was about to say, the opposite end of that spectrum...
Is that a word?
Lambasted? Oh, yeah. Lambasted?
Anyway, who cares?
You're lambasted. That's, what's his name?
Sam Kekovich?
Sam Kekovich. He's a lambasted.
He's a lambasted.
He's from Manchester.
Can you call this episode lambasted?
Lambasted.
Or are you not allowed to swear?
You don't make sense. I had a point. Oh, yeah, Ken Hinkley. He's at the opposite end of the spectrum where there's still discussions about his role as a coach. They've won 6 on the trot. They've got the best winning streak in the AFL. And his security is still being talked about.
I think it's because we all know that...
They are very prone to not doing what they're currently doing.
Yeah.
They do look good, though. I think
I've
it's
got them
fair to be
finishing
saying.
top 4 at this point.
Me too. I think they're going to take home a swell of games. It's the players who underperformed last year. Jeremy Finlayson's the perfect example. Like, he did well in the ruck role, but without uncomfortable. He's playing great football, like really, really good football.
And like they're playing players like Ollie Lord, and they're going to upgrade to Marshall soon.
Horne-Francis looks great. Boak had a bit of a blip year last year, playing really good footy. I think they've really figured out how to play him in the veteran role now.
I think he also started the year a little bit underdone.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
He was pulling out of some contests
But
that was very un-Boak-like, and that has stopped.
It's funny, like all of last year we talked about how much pressure was on Hinkley. They had a really good second half last year. Their backline we obviously praised last year. They're one of the only 4 teams with the premiership profile currently of top 6 attack and defence. And they're playing really good footy. It's really interesting to watch because we talked about it round 2. We said Ken Hinkley was the coach under most pressure. And now they are playing great footy. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. Hinkley does love his players. And you can see the way he coaches. Like, he is really behind the players. That's how he coaches. He's very much in the trenches. But, like, sometimes to his own detriment. Like, the fans see players getting a game week in and week out that they're confused about. And McEntee...
Wait, don't say it out loud.
I said it out loud. I think McEntee tries so hard. He is a pressure footballer. I just think that he struggles with foot skills and laying tackles incorrectly that give away free kicks. That, like, I get why fans are frustrated watching that happen. And look, people have been wrong before. I watched Mark O'Connor play a really good game in a grand final this year.
This year?
Last year.
Lockie Jones is another one.
Yeah, so...
Lockie Jones?
Lockie Jones, yeah.
Yeah, another one for Port.
Yeah, but look at him.
Yeah, I know. Who is the
That's a
coach under the
rig-based.
most
That's
pressure
a
now?
ring-based selection. Lockie Jones, Simpson. If they lose to
Is he
Hawthorn this
under
week,
pressure?
his job is in huge trouble.
It's in Tassie, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you've lost to Hawthorn and Richmond, the other two teams that were struggling as much as you, they played Richmond back into form. They've lost to North already. They
I feel
beat
like-
GWS only because GWS had heat stroke from that game.
Yeah. I feel like they've already set the expectation of we don't have players, we are losing.
Yeah, but they
False.
have a fan base that is used to winning and has high expectations. They have former players who've watched this club never be bad for long periods of time, who are all coming out in the media and talking about how embarrassed they are. I don't think it's right. I think that they are very complacent because of their success. But I do think that culture they've created of success means that the vocal voices have a lot of power at West Coast. And when you have really good former players coming out, and obviously Simpson's not one, he's a premiership coach, which obviously helps. But when you've got former greats of the club, Dean Kemp was the last one to come out and say that he is embarrassed watching West Coast play football at the moment. And like I said, I think that was a very bitter comment to make from someone who was used to success as a player and then as a fan post-retirement. But when the members hear former players saying stuff like that, and the club doesn't do much to address it, like I think Freo's been really strong in addressing stuff that the media have said about the club, whereas West Coast, I think they're so busy dealing with what's going on in-house, they can't afford to come out and pan crappy reporting, or just takes from former players, because they're too busy dealing with the absolute storm that's happening at the club. And their injury list just isn't getting better. Like every week, a couple of players come back and then another one's gone. Like it's
currently 1,900 games missing.
Yeah, and Matthew Lloyd suggested cutting list sizes the other day. Like they'd have had to forfeit games this year. They would have gone through that list. They have. Another part of that though is that there's other problems going on outside, and it's probably because of the same thing. Artie Jones could have been part of West Coast Academy. His mum had the paperwork and didn't sign it because the club didn't do a good enough job of convincing them why it was worth it. And so was Erasmus, who's now at Freo. Like that's another two young players who could have been on their list.
That's
this
interesting.
year, who they would have got for free, so not even for draft picks.
Didn't even know West Coast had an academy.
Every club's got one now.
No, I thought West Coast were one of those special ones. Like their waffle team has really weird restrictions as opposed to Freo.
It does, yeah. Well, the academy's next, a bit different. But yeah, they're two players they could have signed for free, but either didn't follow up on enough or didn't give the offer to, and have now ended up costing other clubs picks, but playing reasonable footy for other teams. And West Coast really are in dire need of talented youth that's not injured.
I think especially with
And Artie Jones would just be
Junior
an injection of
Rioli
excitement.
moving on, and that's one in, and Erasmus could potentially be part of a future core with a bunch of players there. So.
Artie Jones running that victory lap after his first win with the Bulldogs was just awesome. Like the excitement of a young player at a club is just always so good. And that goal he kicked last week was brilliant. Like West Coast could do with some excitement like that, and they just don't have it. Their young talent is grit at the moment.
If you're watching West Coast games, you're simply watching to hope Allen gets a few goals.
Yeah, he's freakishly
His
good.
goal kicking is really good to watch.
It's insane how well he is playing at one of the worst performing teams we've seen in the history of footy.
Just imagine how good he could be when they're playing well.
Yeah.
We didn't get to see this level of Allen when they were playing well with him around.
He was either injured or too young.
Or being swapped at either end of the ground.
Yeah.
But he's
got to be the next captain, doesn't he? Is it like a Cogs scenario where like GWS made him captain instead of giving him a massive pay rise to convince him to stay or make sure he stays? Neither do I, but you got to make sure he doesn't.
I don't think so.
But yeah, he's in incredible form. But yeah, I think the problem with West Coast is that their young talent, a lot of it is grunt. Like they've got obviously Cully, but that's grunt in the midfield. Even when Clark comes in, it's grunt in the midfield. Even Jinby is grunt. Like there's no Elliot Yeo replacement. There's no Gaff replacement currently.
Hunt's too outside.
Yeah, but there's no real replacement for those kinds of players that do the miraculous thing, get the ball inside 50, and help you score goals.
Tim Kelly or bust.
Yeah, and that's been it, hasn't it? Like that game against Melbourne,
had a really good season too.
We watched Tim Kelly play one of the best performances I've seen a player play all year. I think he got coaches' votes in a massive loss to a team where I think the opposition had like 4 30 disposal getters. That's a special mention I should have given. Duggan got a coach's vote on the weekend. Walloping loss.
We like Duggan.
Credit to that. But yeah, I think the problems are deep at West Coast. But a lot of the problem is that they're a victim of their own success currently. The fans are just so used to it. Whereas you have to respect the way Hawthorn are just their fans are laughing it off, and like every loss, they're like, it's one game closer to Harley Reid. Like they're not, like they're dealing with it a lot better, I think, at the other end, that because they've had periods before where their club has struggled, either financially or wins-wise.
Yeah.
Though, statistically, they are due for a flag. Hawthorn.
Oh, yeah, next year. Actually, isn't it this year?
I think it's this year.
They got a
so
long streak of wins to come. It starts this weekend.
Maybe they're just going to win the next 2 after this year.
Even it out?
Yeah.
That would be crazy.
Be insane to go from second last to last, or probably
It would
last.
make Sam Mitchell the coach of all time.
It would, wouldn't it? At least he lets wear the sleeves.
Yeah, and now sleeves are
Sleeves are fine
available
at
at
North?
Melbourne. Or is Jaden Stevenson such a fig jam?
That he convinced.
He just puts it on.
Just puts them on.
He gets a spray every game and doesn't care because
Maybe. Whose jumper did I see on the weekend that I was disappointed with the sleeves? Some club had a different strip on, but the sleeves were just plain one colour, and I was like, you haven't committed to the bit on that.
Oh, where it's just the Guernsey and then it's just like
Yeah,
the black
like a
sleeves.
single sleeve colour?
Was it a Saints player? Because Saints do that.
Yeah, it might have been. I think Collingwood's the same as well. They just got the white sleeves, and it's like I think like North and Geelong do it really well with the Hawthorn as well. With if you keep the hoops or stripes going on the sleeves, it really kind of makes the shape. Whereas I think the single colour sleeve just looks like you're wearing an undershirt.
Yeah. And I have actually seen, I think it was, again, St Kilda, where they just had like what I assume was a skin on underneath.
Who was it for Geelong last year? Was it close one game? He wore a short sleeve over a long sleeve, like a game in Canberra or something. That was nuts. I've never seen that done before. That must have been...
Where it gets cold, he's so small.
That must have been so hard to get off. Like, jumpers are tight enough as it is, let alone wearing 2 of them.
He was holding his ribs together or something.
Yeah, I guess there's not much of him under that jumper, so... have you got anything else to bring up? That's a pretty good place to leave it.
I don't have a lot. Like I said, I promise you one thing, it's nothing.
I'm zonked after having an hour and a half dentist appointment that's going to be 15 minutes today. I have another one coming up.
I spent 4 hours working
Didn't
doing
like
nothing, so...
Yeah, you can help people. You're tech support now, aren't you? That's
No, I just turn my camera off and ignore them.
Anyway, thanks for joining us on The Back Pocket. We will see you again next week. I was going to bring up some games that are coming out this weekend, but I know none of them. I think we know West Coast playing Hawthorn.
Dreamtime?
Dreamtime at the G. Geelong are playing Freo. I'm going to that. I should have known that one.
Can't play
Collingwood. Playing Collingwood, they are.
Big
Is it
game.
Sydney next week?
No.
No? A few weeks away. Anyway, there's some games on, and I'm going to watch them, and then we'll give some votes next week. You'll find us at the Back Pocket AU on all socials. That's me. You good? You know?
I've got nothing.
See you next week.
I'm not giving my email out again.
Yeah, I had to mitch you out on that one. Only after 30-odd people.
I changed my PayPal email.
That's so good. All right. Enjoy the footy. We'll see you next week.
Bye.